Hi all, I have an absolutely amazing game to show you. It's Stockfish 8 playing with the white pieces against Alphazero. It's from T-set conditions, a T-set start position. And it's actually, Alphazero has a total disaster in this game. It's the shortest ever loss on record against Stockfish. So what on earth happened here? Chess is 99% tactics, a chess quote by Richard Teichmann. So the neural network approach is not totally about calculation, it's about learning, self-learning, and often that's patterns like form pawns. Does it help Alphazero here? We have e4 from Stockfish 8, e6. This is the book moves given. So the French defense territory, the classical variation, and encouraging white to close the center. So knight f6, the classical variation. We have bishop g5, which is a key move. Bishop e7, and now e5, knight fd7, and now h4, the Alekhine-Chattard gambit, very dangerous gambit. Now, in this game, the book move given is bishop takes g5 to accept the ferocity, the dynamic aggression of white's pieces on that h file. Black has other choices like c5 in chess-based live book has been played before, or h6. For example, h6, we could take on e7, but this isn't so scary for black. If black's not greedy, this looks like a reasonable position. White does have a small edge, but black's got chances to undermine the center, as an example. But here, the book move given, bishop takes g5. So the full dynamic pressure of white is here. After knight h3, this is the known continuation. Now, usually here, queen g4 was played here, prompting g6, and now usually there's knight f4 in this position, which has various ideas. But here we have knight g5, which does seem a really interesting alternative, as proven by Stockfish. If there was ever a theoretical novelty in the French defense, this is, I believe, one of the most important, and I touched on it before in another video actually. Knight g5 seems really dangerous, looking at f7 and h7. So here, Alphazero plays h6. Just to show you some of the dangers already tactically, on say black played knight f8, the queen on g4 is useful for bang, knight takes d5, and then queen takes c8 check. So there's already little tactics like that to be aware of. The pawn's hit though, that's like the key thing. So black can't really do that defending the pawn. Plays h6, another pawn move. On c5, if this pin doesn't really help black because it backfires on the pinner after knight f6 check, and then this is check. So we have h6. White just ignores that knight, just leaves the knight on g5, just castles queenside because of the pin against h8. So we have knight c6 here. Now again, on knight f8, there's the tactic knight takes d5, using that pin against the e6 pawn against the c8 bishop. So that's not possible. Knight b6 looks plausible, but bishop d3 has the menacing idea of knight takes f7, a well-known kind of tactic. For example, knight c6, bang, knight takes f7. And if queen takes, then there's bishop takes g6, pinning the queen to the king. And if king takes, this is also bad because of check here, and then the rook slides in with rook h3, and this is devastation. If black has to give up that rook, this position, even though the bishop's lost, black is really pinned up here and is ending up losing anyway in this scenario. It's horrible for black with that pin on the c8 bishop against the rook, and the protector of the rook's been taken away with knight a4. So that's all pretty devastating stuff. So the decision here was knight c6. So this avoids the possibility now of c5 undermining the white center. So the white center is pretty secure here now. And in fact, also, knight b5 is now dangerous. We have two knights on the fifth rank. Common advice is to try and kick away a knight when it's on your fifth, on the fifth rank, because they're quite tactically dangerous. So here the knights are really both tactically dangerous on both sides of the board. There is an aesthetic tactically to this game. Now here, knight b6 is played defending c7 like that. So okay, let's run with that. Now an interesting move, rook d3, which this third rank is free to use by both rooks, and a great target here is f7, of course. So this is a great way of mobilizing to f7 this d1 rook. We have h5. If we look at this position with, say, a6, then knight takes f7 is really dangerous, believe it or not. For example, a takes, there's taking the rook. This is harmless because of king b1, and white can weather the storm here by protecting, make sure c2 is protected after the checks, and then play rook b3, and then there's always rook a3, knowing that c2 is protected. So this position is okay, c2 is protected there. It's the black attack is repulsed there, the rebellion is crushed. So yeah, white's winning that. So so a6, knight takes f7 is really dangerous. So a takes b5 is not working. Queen takes, there's rook f3, and black falls to pieces here basically. Say this, knight takes c7, dragging the queen away, for queen takes g6, and although black's material up, black's falling to bits. The h8 rook, for example, there. So this is really devastating stuff. So we have h5 being played, and now this is just ignored. Rook f3, brilliant move tactically, just ignoring that, because if the queen is now taken, then the forcing move, rook takes h8 check, and now rook takes f7 regains the queen with big interest. So this is a big advantage to white. So just, yeah, casually ignoring the queen being attacked and putting more pressure on f7, the soft spot. So a6 is played, and now here another, this is fabulous tactics, queen g3 is played. So basically there is now the idea of rook takes f7, so offering the knight on b5. Now this is immune as well, because if a takes, rook takes f7, this is devastation. After c3, for example, queen a4, queen f4, this is just too much for black to bear. For example, the queen goes there, then this knight's pinned, making queen e7 checkmate a threat, and that's not good news. But let's have a look at this again. So if, say, rook a3 here, you might think rook takes c7, the casual rook takes c7, then taking the queen. This is a big advantage for white, this position. Yeah, it's all pretty crushing. This a takes just doesn't work after rook takes f7. Black's falling to bits. So we have actually knight d8, and you can see that the congestion, the cramp, these spectator pieces are not helping the soft spot. The critical soft spot of black's position is not helped by these pieces on the queen side here. We have the knight now retreating to c3. Now knight d7 is played. On bishop d7, you might think to try and do something with the queen side pieces. Bishop d3 targeting at the pawn chain. So for example, h4, queen g4, and then bang, knight takes f7 is devastation. This is too much. Pin and win is another famous tactical quotation, and here it's pretty evident this pin is crushing. White's going to be winning material back. Black has to get away from there, and white has a big advantage there. So we have knight d7, bishop d3, more pressure on that pawn chain around the king. Great scrutiny. Knight f8 is played. Here, if c5, knight takes f7, rook takes f7 is devastation after bishop takes g6. And if king takes here, then queen takes, and then the rook swings in for that rook f3. Big advantage to white. So we have knight f8, rook h4, and the rooks are going to double. We say sometimes to have the pawns ahead of the pieces, but here the pieces are ahead of the f2 pawn, and it doesn't really matter. The idea of doubling the rooks, it works tactically. If it works, it's okay. Sometimes, as they say, you don't have to be too theoretical about how one attacks soft spots. Now here, black played rook g8, and in this position there's an absolutely stunning tactical move. And in fact, I had a nice discussion with the on Leela forums about this move, and saying could the classic AB engines find the best move in this position. Actually, they found the testing move instead of this at some point, but there is either a testing move which actually leaves the position exactly as it is, and you can retry to find this more positive move. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here? It's totally breaking the black position in all variations. This next move, it's absolutely magical tactically. So 5 seconds to pause the video. White to play. Bishop c4. Yeah, product of exhaustive search, classic AB alpha beta engines, finding this wonderful move. The move in the forums, by the way, was the neutral move knight h3, which basically says that rook takes h5 is a threat because it's pinning that pawn now for rook takes h5, and you might have your Stockfish saying knight h3, the rook unpins, and then you have this position again, and the rook goes there again. So you end up having to play a constructive move. And you might find in your analysis, by the way, Stockfish does this all the time, these testing moves, which apparently they don't really do anything negative to your position. But when you're analysing games like this, you really want to find the more constructive moves a lot of the time. So the constructive move here is this bishop c4. Now, whatever black does, black's in big trouble here. We can tell intuitively that there's spectator pieces here on the queen side. So why is this devastating? Well, queen d7 was played in the game. On c6, white can just play either knight actually to e4, for example, so threatening that huge knight f6 check. So for example here, and then this position is really devastating after the check, winning the rook on g8, so taking there. And so in fact, yeah, either knight could have popped into e4 there for this knight f6 check. So c6 doesn't really help because of this either knight to e4. D takes c4 actually gives the feature of pawn mobility for white, which can be immediately used with d5, and the big threat of d6 as well is something to be considering here. So for example, knight d7, rook takes c4 as well, with now rook takes c7 and d6 on the cards, is absolutely devastation. For example, like this, there are absolutely devastating lines here. White crashing through, basically. So yeah, these lines crashing through. Let's have a look. And on bishop d7 there, by the way, there's d6 bang, which is actually winning the queen. The queen will have to give herself up for something. So that's actually winning the queen. So this is a totally devastating position after d5. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. So yeah, this position here, rook takes c4, is absolutely critical for black. So that makes that work. So let's have a look at this bishop c4 again. So we've looked at c6, d takes e4, d takes c4. Say knight d7. We've looked at in the variation knight d7 here. Pardon me, knight d7 here. So on bishop c4, knight d7, we're saying this position, bang, bishop takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes c7 check, black's falling apart. This is devastating e6, opening up this diagonal, and now, yeah, winning the queen, playing the check. This is just absolutely miserable. Black couldn't even obtain there because queen d6 checkmate. So yeah, all of this devastation happens basically, yeah, whatever applied there on bishop c4. So yeah, magical move, bishop c4, magical tactical move. So queen d7 was the response from Alphazero, but now knight ce4, so leaving two pieces hanging but wanting to go into f6 to fork the queen and king. This is taken, knight takes. Now there's no queen takes because again knight f6 check. If queen takes d4, knight f6 check, unveils the attack of the rook against the queen. We can take this rook first though with check, then take the queen. So knight h7 was played to try and parry knight f6, but now pin and win. Rook takes h5 using the pin there, and the game actually ended here. Yeah, crushing, absolutely crushing tactically. So let's see this game end position. If queen takes d4, queen g4 is a massively powerful move in this position, massively powerful. And you might think, well, hold on, okay, it sets up a tactic against the queen. Why is this so powerful? On queen takes c4, guess what the idea is? Okay, it's not to play knight f6 check here because black scoops up a lot of pieces and actually better. But no, just a quiet killer move. Rook takes h7, leaving knight f6 on the table now for queen takes c4. And black's totally busted in this position. For example, bishop d7, knight f6 check, we take the rook and then take the queen. So what does black actually do? Queen takes a2 check, and we play queen b4 check here. Look, the knight and queen are cooperating well for a checkmate. Queen d5, we have knight f6 check, winning the queen. Queen b4 check. Sorry. Yeah, we've seen, actually we can play queen b4 check even better first actually, but knight takes d5 is fine. Here queen f1 check. This doesn't help black, this position, because of check, and now queen g5. This is absolutely crushing. Let's see, so for example check, and then rook d3. Black's in a sort of mating net as well as losing material. For example, like this, be checkmating. So all of these beautiful variations also exist in the final position. Let's just go back here. So rook takes h5. That was on queen takes d4. On g takes, we just take on g8. Then knight f6. So here, queen e8 checkmate. Knight f6, absolutely devastating. On knight takes, e takes, then there's queen f8 check here. Form pawn is helping. If here, that's that. And on king c6 here, then there's queen c5 checkmate. So yeah, just to take it to the game end position. But to quote Goodwill Hunting, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not Alphazero's fault. It's TSEC. Some of these start positions in TSEC, I think the stronger the classical AB engines, especially like Stockfish, it's going to end up in basically a loss for the weaker engines. Or even if they're just as strong. If it's cramping like this with spectator pieces as a feature of accepting a gambit, maybe there's just simply no defense. But knight g5 is like a major novelty, really, I believe now. It should be the way forward, knight g5, rather than knight f4 in this gambit line. So a really, truly fascinating game. And the Alphazero team did say chess is a bit more tactical than Go. So the neural network approach is perhaps more effective in the realms of the game Go because of the extreme complexity that even building an evaluation function is just a mammoth task. So, but in chess, yeah, it seems we're not quite at the end of the era for the classical alpha beta engines. And one spin on that is, it's just the extra complexity. You could say the extra. In a way, you could say the extra complexity and tactics of Go make it beyond current engines, and you have to use a neural network approach. That sounds a bit fuzzy and as if, yeah, there's more scope to hang yourself in Go and you need the neural networks. But yeah, this is an iconic game example of what the importance of chess tactics, even in closed positions, especially in closed positions maybe when there's spectator pieces, and tactics can smash through for the side with greater piece mobility. I hope you enjoyed this one. Good for the Stockfish fans. Okay. Comments, questions, appreciated. If you enjoyed this game video, please click on the top left box, which should appear shortly, to become a member at chessbowl.net. You can play against other YouTubers. There's also the improved menu, learn from the masters, YouTube order button. So yeah, like, share, subscribe with the notification bell, also appreciated, and check out the new Teespring store in the description for your form porn or other chess t-shirts. Thanks very much.